It was supposed to be an ordinary hiking expedition. 2 youth teams, 1 mountain range, a plan for adventure and training in the Siberian wilderness. But by the end of the week, 6 would be dead, some violently, others mysteriously, leaving behind a scene so terrifying, so unexplained, it would draw comparisons to the infamous Dyatlov Pass. Their bodies were found with no shoes, torn clothes, blood on their faces, and foam at their mouths. The only survivor? A 17-year-old girl who ran through the forest barefoot, covered in scratches, too traumatized to speak. This is not a legend, not folklore. This happened in August 1993, and no one has ever fully explained why. Welcome to Crime Teller Midnight. I'm your host. And tonight, we're walking into the shadows of the Siberian mountains to tell a story that still haunts hikers, rescuers, and investigators to this day. The Hamaldaban mountain range is a rugged, wind-swept region in southern Siberia. Not far from Lake Baikal, the world's deepest lake, the terrain is cold, beautiful, and unforgiving. Sharp ridges, wild forests, sudden storms, remote valleys with little rescue access. For experienced hikers, it's a thrilling challenge. For amateurs, it's a death trap. In early August 1993, 2 hiking teams from Kazakhstan set off on a joint expedition. Both teams were led by seasoned instructors. Lyudmila Korovina, a strict but respected survivalist, led the Ridge Route team. Konstantin, another trainer, led the Valley Route team. The plan: hike separate paths, meet at Lake Tawatu, return home together. Simple, organized, well-planned. But only one team would return intact. Lyudmila's group included 7 people. Lyudmila Korovina, 41, instructor Sasha, 23, strong, fit. Lyudmila's star student Tatiana, 24, calm and composed Dennis, 19, lively and social Victoria, 16, shy but tough Timur, 15, youngest, eager to impress Valentina Xiaowa Utochenko, 17, quiet, observant, the eventual sole survivor. They were not beginners. All had trained for mountain survival. All were physically capable. All trusted Lyudmila, and that trust may have led them too far. The first few days of hiking went smoothly. The weather was cold, but manageable. Spirits were high. The team navigated rough terrain, camped at high altitudes, and remained in contact with Konstantin's team. Everything was routine, until it wasn't. Because on August 4th, things began to unravel. A powerful storm rolled in, bringing wind, freezing rain, and sudden drops in temperature. Korovina's team had set up camp in an exposed mountain pass, lacking proper shelter. They tried to stay dry and huddled together, but by morning, they were already weakened. Clothes soaked, food damp, bodies cold. And as they resumed hiking, the nightmare began. 7 hikers, a freezing storm, a night spent exposed in the Siberian mountains. When morning came, they tried to continue. But within hours, the expedition would descend into something far more terrifying than hypothermia. Foaming mouths, bleeding faces, convulsions, screaming. Whatever happened on that mountain? It wasn't just the cold. The team pushed forward through the storm's aftermath. They were wet, cold, exhausted, but experienced. Lyudmila Korovina, their instructor, urged them to keep moving toward the next shelter point. They descended into a ravine. And then, Sasha collapsed. He was the strongest of the group, 23 years old, athletic, Lyudmila's pride. But suddenly he froze in place. Then his eyes rolled back. Blood came from his nose. He began convulsing violently. He cried out, his voice hoarse and strangled. He hit the ground, twitching uncontrollably. And then he stopped breathing. Dead. within minutes. The others froze in shock. Lyudmila screamed instructions, trying to calm them, trying to make sense of it. But before she could finish, Tatiana collapsed next. Blood from her ears. Foam at the mouth, her face twisted in fear and pain. Then Dennis, the social upbeat 19-year-old, clutched his throat and began tearing at his own clothes. He ran into a rock at full speed, fell, screamed, cried. Then, stillness. 3 people, gone. In under 30 minutes, hypothermia kills slowly. It causes confusion, sleepiness, disorientation, not bleeding, not foaming mouths, not seizures, not mass hysteria. Something else was happening here. Something violent, fast and unexplainable. Witnessing her students die one by one. Lyudmila collapsed next. The 41-year-old survival instructor clutched her chest, gasped, and died of a heart attack. 4 down, 3 left, Victoria, Timur, and Valentina, teenagers, now completely alone in a mountain ravine filled with bodies and silence. Then Victoria began screaming uncontrollably. She clawed at her face, tore at her clothes, ran in circles, disoriented and howling. She smashed her head against a rock, once, twice, a 3rd time, until she collapsed in a pool of blood. Dead. Timur tried to help. He begged Valentina to run, but he, too, was bleeding, crying, shaking. He stumbled after her as she fled into the forest, barefoot, soaked, in shock. She never saw him again. 17-year-old Valentina Xiaohua Utochenko had no food, no compass, no shoes, only terror. She ran for miles. She slept under trees, drank river water, avoided trails. She didn't know if whatever killed her friends would come for her next. But something primal, some spark of survival, pushed her forward, and after days wandering the forest, she was found. A solo tourist named Alexander spotted a scratched, trembling girl emerging from the woods. She was barefoot, mumbling, covered in bruises. She collapsed into his arms. He took her to authorities, and through tears and confusion, she told them what she had seen. No one believed it at first. Valentina Utochenko survived. Barely. She ran barefoot through the Siberian wilderness, covered in scratches and shock, the only living witness to one of the most terrifying expedition disasters ever recorded. But when search and rescue teams reached the site, what they saw didn't match any known survival failure. What they saw looked more like a battlefield or a psychological horror film. This was no ordinary tragedy. This was a scene that would haunt every man who saw it. On August 10th, 1993, 6 days after Valentina was found, search teams entered the area she described. The forest was dense, the terrain unstable, the air eerily still. They moved slowly through the mountainside, looking for any sign of the fallen hikers. They didn't have to go far. On August 24th, rescuers located the corpses, 6 in total, and none of them looked peaceful. Sasha was still lying where he fell, his eyes wide open, mouth frozen mid-scream. Dennis had blood caked across his nose and ears. Victoria was found with severe facial trauma, consistent with self-inflicted blunt force injuries. Lyudmila's expression was stiff, cold, her arm reaching out toward her students. Tatiana looked as if she had choked before death. Timur's body lay half buried in soil, his face covered in blood and earth. All were in various stages of decomposition. All had torn clothing, bare feet, and postures of agony. None had visible wounds from external violence, no sign of animal attack, no landslide, no avalanche, just bodies and questions. What horrified searchers even more, less than 2 kilometers away, tucked behind a thicket of trees, was a small wooden shelter. Abandoned but dry, a place that could have saved them, if they had made it just a little farther. if they hadn't collapsed where they did. But they didn't. They died, just out of reach of safety. Official autopsies were conducted in a small nearby town. The findings shocked everyone. No drugs or poisons detected in the bloodstream, no external wounds, except those clearly self-inflicted. All bodies showed signs of hypothermia, Lyudmila's cause of death, acute cardiac arrest. The others likely died from exposure, shock, or unknown neurogenic causes. The death certificates were issued, but none of them explained the violence, the madness, the speed of the deaths. People don't usually die like this on hikes. Not together. Not with symptoms like foaming mouths, bleeding ears, seizures, sudden madness, and certainly not within minutes of each other. This wasn't a slow decline. It was a domino collapse, and no official theory could explain it. Valentina, still traumatized, gave her full report. She watched each of them die in real time. No one attacked them. No one slipped or fell. They simply went insane, panicked, screamed, died, and she ran. It wasn't the cold that killed them. It was something else. Some doctors suggested mass hysteria triggered by extreme stress. Others pointed to acute panic amplified by hypothermia. But panic doesn't explain bleeding ears. It doesn't explain violent seizures or self-mutilation. This wasn't just fear. It was something deeper. Immediately, speculation flooded newspapers, police reports, and campfire whispers. Did they eat poisonous mushrooms? Were they exposed to nerve agents? Could it be toxic gas from old Soviet weapons testing? Did they experience infrasound-induced panic, a natural phenomenon known to cause irrational fear? None of it could be proven, and nothing explained why Valentina survived. 6 hikers, dead in strange, terrifying ways. One survivor, traumatized, barefoot, and half-mad from fear. No weapons, no external wounds, no enemy. Just a remote mountain pass, and a story that doesn't add up. With no clear answers, investigators and the public began doing what people always do in the face of horror. They started guessing. And some of those guesses weren't as far-fetched as they sound. One of the most immediate theories was ingestion poisoning. Maybe the group ate wild mushrooms, consumed spoiled meat, or unknowingly drank contaminated water. But forensic tests found no toxins in their systems, no fungal spores, no stomach damage consistent with poisoning. The symptoms didn't match common poisons, and if it had been food-related, why did only some die quickly, while others ran and panicked? Verdict: unlikely. Some speculated the group accidentally wandered into a military test zone, left over from Soviet-era experiments. The symptoms: seizures, bleeding, fear, mirror mild nerve agent exposure, convulsions, confusion, foaming at the mouth, but no military records mention the area as a test site. There was no chemical residue found, and Valentina, who fled the scene, suffered no lasting physical effects. If nerve agents had been used, everyone should have been exposed equally. Verdict: plausible but unsupported. Infrasound is low-frequency sound, often below the range of human hearing. It can cause uncontrollable fear, physical pressure, disorientation, hallucinations. A famous example: the Dyatlov Pass incident in 1959. Another Siberian hiking tragedy with bizarre deaths. Could strong winds funneled through the pass have created infrasound? Maybe, but it wouldn't explain bleeding seizures or why Lyudmila died of cardiac arrest. Verdict: interesting, but incomplete mass hysteria, also called mass psychogenic illness, can cause shared symptoms, rapid spread of anxiety, physical manifestations of stress. Some cases have involved people fainting, shaking, even going blind, all with no biological cause. But mass hysteria rarely causes death, and certainly not violent convulsions or self-harm to the point of fatality. Plus, Valentina never experienced any of these symptoms. Why? Was she immune? Or did she arrive late to whatever happened? Verdict: psychologically compelling, but medically unlikely. When logic fails, mystery thrives. Some theorists believe the group disturbed a spiritual force, they encountered unknown creatures, or were caught in a dimensional rift. These ideas stem not from evidence, but from the eeriness of the deaths, the lack of forensic explanation, and the long history of mystical fear surrounding Siberia's forests. But while spooky, there's no physical support for these ideas, no footprints, no creatures, no missing time. Verdict: emotionally powerful, factually empty. As with any sole survivor, some whispered, "What if she did it?" But this theory falls apart quickly. The wounds were not consistent with assault. Valentina had no motive, and forensic teams found no defensive injuries or struggle. Plus, she was 17, unarmed, and described as physically small. More importantly, she showed genuine trauma, starvation, and signs of prolonged outdoor survival. Verdict: no evidence whatsoever. This is what makes the Hamaldaban tragedy so enduring, because every theory almost fits until it doesn't. Each one explains part of the chaos. None explain all of it. So we're left with questions. Did the terrain hide a rare environmental factor? Was there something about Lyudmila's leadership we haven't heard? Or is this just a tragic cocktail of cold, panic, and physiological collapse? In August 1993, 7 hikers entered the Hamaldaban mountains. Only one came back alive. 6 others died in the most disturbing, mysterious, and violent fashion, foaming at the mouth, convulsing, collapsing. No final words, no clear cause, no pattern to their madness. Just one girl, running barefoot through the woods, trying to escape something she couldn't describe. That girl is Valentina Xiaohua Utochenko, and her survival didn't bring peace. It brought questions, guilt, and silence. She was 17 at the time, quiet, hard-working, physically strong from years of survival training. Her friends described her as focused but kind. Not a natural leader, but dependable. Not outspoken, but deeply observant. She was the youngest female on the expedition, aside from 16-year-old Victoria, and somehow she lived. After her rescue, Valentina was hospitalized. Physically, she was weak but stable. Mentally, she was fractured. She barely spoke. She struggled with survivor's guilt. She had nightmares for years. She refused to hike again. Even when she finally described the events of that day, it was through tears and trembling hands. She didn't embellish. She didn't speculate. She just told the truth. And then retreated from public view for nearly a decade. Years later, when criticism arose about Lyudmila's leadership, Valentina came forward again. She defended her fallen instructor. She did everything she could. We had food, we had training. It wasn't her fault. That's all she said. No anger, no accusations. Just a quiet insistence that whatever happened, it wasn't a failure of planning. It was something else. There's a unique kind of grief that comes from being the last one standing. You carry every face, every scream, every moment of confusion, and you replay them, not in front of crowds, but in silence. Survivor's guilt doesn't end when the world moves on. For Valentina, the story never ended. She still lives with it. There's no indication Valentina ever received more answers than anyone else. She wasn't interviewed on national TV. She didn't write a book. She didn't seek fame. She simply disappeared back into her life. That silence? It's not suspicious. It's survival. Valentina teaches us that sometimes surviving isn't heroic. Sometimes it's quiet, painful, messy. It means enduring what others didn't have to, and refusing to let that day define the rest of your life. The Hamaldaban tragedy is unsolved, not because of poor science, not because of supernatural causes, but because it lives in that in-between space, where panic meets nature, where cold meets trauma, where reality bends just enough to leave us doubting what we know. Let's not forget their names. Lyudmila Korovina, Sasha Tatiana, Denis Victoria Timur Young lives. Adventurous spirits, each with dreams that stopped somewhere in the snow. Their deaths are still debated, but their lives, they were real and they mattered. Some stories don't end with a twist. They end with a girl sitting quietly in a hospital bed, wondering why she lived. They end with questions the forest never answers, and a legacy built not on understanding, but on memory. She was the only one to walk out of the woods, but the weight of 6 lost voices was something she carried forever. Crime Teller Midnight